It all started with a steak, medium rare, its bitterness laced with disappointment. Then came the silence, stretched tight between two people when words can no longer save anything. She arrived reeking of cheap wine and someone else's hands. He met her not with a knife in his hand, but in his heart. 20 years, 2 children, a home built not from bricks, but from sleepless nights and clenched teeth. And around her neck, a pendant hiding the truth inside. He didn't scream. He watched as cracks turned into a cliff's edge. And then, he began to rebuild himself, without illusions, without her. Because sometimes, revenge is just a way to reclaim your silence. And love, it shows up where it's no longer expected. Hello, my friend. I'm so glad you stopped by my channel. If it's your first time here, don't forget to subscribe and like this video, as every like truly inspires me. Please tell me which city and country you watch this video from. Now, let's get started. The sour trace of bargain bin wine and an assault of synthetic cologne hit me before she even opened her mouth. I kept cutting into my steak, pink enough to weep, and pretended she wasn't standing there, arms crossed in silent challenge. The only thing filling the space between us was the tick-tick-tick of the kitchen clock, each sound slicing the air like a blade. That clock had been a wedding gift from her parents, once pristine, now dulled by years of wear and memory. Its steady rhythm marked the passage of our life together, unchanging, unremarkable, the complete opposite of Elena. "We need to talk," she said, finally breaking the standoff. I didn't answer right away. Instead, I let her stew in it a while longer as I chewed another bite. The steak was perfect. I'd cooked it myself that evening, while she was supposedly out with her friends. Another lie, tossed onto the growing pile. I'd marinated it in salt, pepper, and a hint of long, simmering bitterness, grilling it just the way I liked. She used to make dinner back when pretending to give a damn still came easy. When I finally met her eyes, my voice was calm, emotionless. "Do we really?" I said. She dragged the chair out beside me and lowered herself onto it with deliberate precision. The pendant at her neck, a silver one I'd given her on our anniversary, flashed under the kitchen light. A present, yes, but not without ulterior motive. She launched into her speech, one I imagined she'd rehearsed in front of the mirror. Our relationship was stifling. We had to break free, try new things. Her hand drifted up my thigh like it had done 1,000 times before, more reflex than feeling. I'd spent 20 years on the factory floor, 2 decades breathing in powdered metal, grinding through graveyard shifts, pushing through a fatigue that had settled into my bones like concrete. 20 years of missed holidays, of budgeting and sacrifice, of getting the kids through school and keeping the lights on. That grind had given her the luxury of staying home, of being there for every scraped knee and school recital. And yet, apparently, it wasn't enough. Now she wanted an open marriage. The absurdity would have been hilarious if it didn't burn so deep. But she wasn't asking. This was a confession. The line hadn't just been crossed, it had been left miles behind. I reminded her of our vows. She dismissed them with a chuckle. "It's only physical," she said. Only physical. As if everything we built could be reduced to something transactional. I met Elena in my second year at the mill. I was 23, still trying to figure out who I was. She was 21, a college dropout working the front desk at the clinic where I ended up after a bad lift. A few stitches, a couple dates, and suddenly, I couldn't imagine my life without her. She glowed back then, not like she does now, all polish and performance, but with a real light that came from joy and honesty. We got married 6 months later. My parents thought we were reckless. I thought I'd found something solid. She made me feel seen, like I mattered for the first time in my life. Being one of 5 boys, that feeling was rare. With her, I wasn't invisible. Those first years were lean, secondhand furniture, a rust bucket car, and rent that swallowed most of my paycheck. I picked up extra shifts while she chipped away at her associates. We'd lie in bed dreaming about a little house, weekend barbecues, kids running barefoot through the grass. When Justin came along, I took on a third shift. The exhaustion was relentless, but the idea of building something real kept me going. I still remember the night he was born, her nails digging into my palm as she brought him into the world, whispering through tears, "We made this." And we had. Lisa followed 3 years later. By then, I'd moved up to floor supervisor. Better pay, but heavier responsibility. We decided she'd stay home full-time. It was practical and felt right for the family. I convinced myself the grind was temporary, just the price of a better future. We settled into a rhythm. Work, dinners eaten late, bedtime stories when I got home in time, and collapsing into sleep before we could say more than good night. Elena seemed content. She had the house, the kids, her weekly book club, and the women from church. Or so I thought. It was about 6 months ago when things started to shift. Suddenly, Friday nights were hers. Girls' night, she called it. After years of barely leaving the house beyond school functions, it seemed out of character. But I wanted to trust her. We had built too much to throw it away on suspicion. Then came the night I dialed Sandra, her supposed Friday companion. The confusion in Sandra's voice said it all. She hadn't seen Elena in weeks. I hung up with my pulse in my ears. That should have been the night I confronted her, the night she stumbled in with her blouse misaligned and lipstick half erased. But I didn't. I stayed silent, observed, began to gather proof. Maybe it was pride, or maybe I needed something irrefutable, something I couldn't deny. Our anniversary was around the corner, and I made preparations, not the kind she expected. Instead of roses or a dinner reservation, I dropped a month's overtime pay on a pendant, sleek, elegant, and outfitted with a concealed camera. Took some work finding someone discreet, but desperation makes you resourceful. I paid a tech guy in the next town cash. He didn't ask why. When I handed it to her, her response was deeply genuine. She fastened it around her neck and told me it was exactly what she wanted. She vowed never to take it off. And true to her promise, she kept it on always, even during her Friday nights out with her friends. The most difficult part was the waiting. Week after week, I'd watch her get ready. Dresses I didn't recognize, her makeup heavier than anything she wore for me, a scent that seemed foreign, like it belonged to someone I hadn't married. I'd sit there, pretending to pay attention to whatever show was on, while my imagination tormented me. Images of her with someone else, smiling at another man like she used to smile at me. When she returned, usually too drunk to talk and half asleep, I'd begin my ritual. I'd wait until her breathing slowed and deepened, then carefully undo the clasp of the necklace, whether she forgot it was there or simply didn't care anymore. The memory card hidden inside slipped into my laptop, its soft glow filling the office we once used for planning family vacations and going over our children's report cards. Each night, I watched the woman I married fade away, replaced by someone I barely recognized. The footage showed her laughing too much at boys who looked like they could be our sons, slipping into gas station bathrooms, cramped back seats, dingy motel rooms. I watched her remove her wedding ring and drop it in her purse before stepping into bars full of strangers, people who had no idea she was Elena Ramirez, mother of 2, Sunday school volunteer, and my wife of 20 years. The first time I saw the recordings, I barely made it to the bathroom before I vomited until my stomach was empty. I thought about smashing the laptop, burning down the house, disappearing completely. But I didn't. I transferred the video to an external drive, erased all traces from the computer, and went back to bed. I stared into the ceiling's darkness until dawn. By the time I reached the 5th video, my emotions were gone. I felt no pain, no fury, just a clinical stillness. I started organizing the files, by date, by man, by location. I made anonymous email accounts, joined forums no one I knew would ever visit, and researched divorce laws in our state like I was studying for a bar exam. I met with an attorney in secret, paid everything in cash. By the 10th clip, I had a roadmap. I wasn't going to be the fool in this story. I didn't beg for explanations. I didn't punch holes in the walls of the home I built with my own hands. I let her dig her own grave, quietly waiting. When the time came, I'd speak, with facts. Until then, I kept playing the role. I went to work, came home, asked about her day, even though I knew it better than she did. I kissed her goodnight, ignored how she flinched away. I stayed connected with our kids, heard their college stories, and never once hinted that their mother was tearing our family apart for shallow pleasure. I became a ghost in my own life, waiting for the moment when the lights would come up and the final act would begin. That moment came. I asked her the question I'd rehearsed countless times, my steak knife resting between us on the table. Her hand paused mid-motion on mine, frozen in the act of tracing small circles. The fear in her eyes told me she knew something had shifted, but she had no idea just how far things had gone. In that instant, I saw through the disguise. I no longer saw my wife. I saw the stranger who had stolen 20 years of my life. I laid everything bare. The necklace, the camera inside it, the recordings, the digital archive I'd created and backed up to a private, untraceable folder online. With every detail I revealed, she seemed to shrink. Her face drained of color, her expression cycling from shock to terror to eerie calm. "You were spying on me?" she whispered, one hand flying up to the necklace. "This whole time?" "No," I replied, voice steady. "Only since our last anniversary. Just long enough to prove what you've really been doing while I was pulling extra shifts to pay for the life you said you wanted." "That's not what this is," she tried, but I cut her off. "No? Then explain it to me, Elena. Help me understand. What difference is there between what I saw and what you think I saw? How is sneaking off with strangers anything but exactly what it looks like?" Tears brimmed in her eyes and streaked her cheeks, carving lines through her foundation. She still looked stunning. I still felt nothing. No rage, no satisfaction, only emptiness. I pushed the divorce papers across the table, and that's when she fell apart. The terms weren't generous. Standard alimony, no claim to my retirement fund, a modest portion of our shared assets. The alternative was worse. I told her exactly who would receive the footage. Her friends, her family, her prayer group, even our children. "You wouldn't do that," she said in a whisper. But we both knew I would. After what felt like forever, she finally asked, "Why? Why didn't you confront me the first time you saw something? Why did you let it keep happening?" I paused. Why hadn't I stopped it sooner? Was I just building an airtight case? Or was I clinging to some dying hope that I'd made a mistake? That somehow, the woman I'd built my life with hadn't really done what the footage showed? I gave her the only answer I had. "I had to be certain," I said. "I needed you to show me exactly who you are." She gave me a strange look then, like she pitied me. "You never really knew me," she said. But she was wrong. I knew her well. I knew the slope of her shoulders, the sound of her laugh during dumb comedies, the way she twisted her hair when she was anxious. I remembered her cradling our newborns, crying over books, setting off the smoke alarm with burned toast. I knew the woman she used to be, and I knew the stranger she had become. I knew everything, except why. But maybe that didn't matter anymore. The divorce went through quietly, with no ceremony. Elena signed the divorce papers without a sound. She kept her eyes on the table, avoiding mine and even her lawyers. The defiance she once carried was gone, replaced by a silent instinct to survive. She wasn't holding on anymore, just letting go and retreating. The fight had left her. I told Justin and Lisa there'd been a family emergency and asked them to come home. Sitting them down in the living room, our living room, where we'd celebrated holidays and birthdays, where we'd once built blanket forts, It was one of the hardest things I've ever done. "Your mother and I are getting divorced," I said, keeping it direct. It was already in motion. Their shocked expressions weren't unexpected, but the questions that followed hit harder than I anticipated. What happened? Why now? Couldn't you have worked it out? Gone to therapy? I had already resolved not to tell them about Elena's infidelity. It wasn't to protect her. It was for them. I wanted them to remember the version of their mother who bandaged wounds and baked birthday cakes, not the one from those recordings. Sometimes people grow in different directions, I told them. What makes sense when you're young doesn't always last forever. Lisa, always sharp, didn't look convinced. She watched me closely. "There's more you're not saying, isn't there?" I met her eyes. There usually is. Elena left the next day. She packed light, just clothes, toiletries, and a few personal items. Everything else remained untouched. The photo albums, furniture, even her grandmother's china. She was already gone when I got back from work. Her house key sat on the kitchen counter next to a small note with just 2 words. "I'm sorry." 2 words for 20 years. It didn't feel like enough. Through mutual friends, I heard she'd gone back to waiting tables. Ironically, at the same bar where she used to meet the men she cheated with. Every now and then, I'd drive past and catch a glimpse of her through the window, carrying drinks and navigating the same dim corners that had once held secrets. There was a cruel kind of balance in that. Exactly 7 months after I'd given her that necklace, our divorce was made official. The final documents arrived in the mail, stamped by a judge who knew nothing of our history. Just a few pieces of paper dissolving decades of promises. I tucked the envelope in a drawer and went out for a long walk, hoping to feel something, closure maybe. But all I found was the hollow space where a marriage had once lived. That evening, I erased all the videos. Not because I had forgiven her, but because I no longer needed the evidence. It had served its purpose. Keeping them would only mean keeping her, in a way. I did keep one backup, locked away on a hard drive in a safety deposit box, just in case she ever tried to contest the divorce down the line. As for me, I sold the house. Too many memories echoed in those rooms. I bought a small place near the lake and took early retirement from the mill. The settlement, along with my savings, was enough for a simple life. For the first time in years, I could sleep through the night without checking the time. At first, the quiet felt strange. No one to cook for. No one waiting to hear how my day went. No familiar presence beside me in bed. I turned to old hobbies I'd let slip, refinishing furniture, fishing, dusting off novels I'd never gotten around to reading. I called Justin and Lisa more regularly, reminding them that while the marriage had ended, my love for them hadn't changed. I also started reconnecting with friends I'd grown distant from during the busy years of family life. Mike, an old high school buddy, took me fishing. Tony from the mill got me into his bowling league. Gradually, I started stitching together a life that felt like it belonged to me. No longer just a provider or a husband, but a man rediscovering what life looked like on his own terms. 6 months after the divorce was finalized, I signed up for a community college cooking class to fill the evenings. That's where I met Naomi. She was the instructor, kind, attentive, maybe 15 years younger than me, though the difference never seemed to matter when we spoke. Naomi wasn't flirtatious or overly warm. She was just present. She noticed things, how seriously I took my awkward attempts at chopping vegetables, how proud I was when I finally nailed a béarnaise sauce. After class, we'd talk, first about recipes, then about books, eventually about our lives. She'd been married once too, briefly. Her husband realized a few years in that marriage wasn't for him. No children, no real mess. Just a chapter that ended quickly. She already knew I was divorced. Small towns have short grapevines. But I didn't go into the ugly details. Some truths don't need retelling. Instead, we focused on what was in front of us, what we could make together from scratch, like the dishes she guided me through each week. Our first date wasn't supposed to be a date. We stayed behind after class to help clean up, and somehow we ended up at her kitchen table, sharing a bottle of wine and talking until the clock struck midnight. She didn't ask about my past, and I didn't volunteer it. Instead, we found common ground: hiking trails, old black and white movies, and the kind of corny puns you groan at before you laugh. 3 months into whatever it was we were becoming, somewhere between friendship and something deeper, Naomi invited me to spend a weekend at her cabin. It was modest: 1 bedroom, a spacious living area, and a view of the lake through wide windows. I brought ingredients, she brought the wine. We spent the weekend cooking, laughing, and talking about nothing in particular, and everything that mattered. Saturday evening, we sat side by side on the dock, watching the sun melt into the water, turning the lake to gold. The silence between us felt comfortable, not heavy or painful like the silences I once knew. Her hand found mine. Just that, no words, no urgency, a gesture that said more than anything spoken. "I like this," she said softly, "being here, with you." I gave her hand a gentle squeeze and watched a heron soar across the fading sky. "I like it too," I said. The night she kissed me, it felt like receiving a gift I never dared to believe was mine to receive. At 53, I stood at an unexpected crossroads, unsure of where to step next. She was 38, grounded, patient, and gentle with the pieces of me still mending. The following morning, I made her breakfast: crispy bacon, eggs, and the French toast I'd perfected under her guidance during our class together. We sat quietly on her porch, watching the morning mist slowly lift from the lake like a curtain rising on a new scene. Eventually, I asked the question that had been quietly circling in my thoughts for days. "What are we doing?" She took a sip of coffee, unhurried, then met my eyes. "We're living," she said. "Really living, I think." Just the other evening, while we sat together watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of fire from my dock, Naomi turned to me with a serious expression. "We need to talk, sweetheart," she said softly. My heart clenched before I could stop it, old fears rushing back with those 5 words, ones that had once signaled the end of something dear. I braced for pain, the echo of Elena's voice still too familiar. But instead, Naomi's hand found mine, her grip tender. "I just want you to know how much I love you, how much you matter to me." The breath I exhaled carried more than air. It carried years of silent fear. I gave her fingers a gentle squeeze. "Well," I said, smiling, "that's the kind of talk I don't mind at all. Because sometimes vengeance isn't about watching someone fall, it's about making space for something better to take root. If I carry any regret, it's only that it took me so long to see what I truly deserved. I still have the necklace, not the pendant, which once held a hidden camera. I shattered that after saving the final footage. But the chain rests quietly in a small box deep in my closet. It's not a keepsake of Elena's betrayal anymore. It's a symbol of what I survived, a marker of strength, a reminder that letting go of what once seemed permanent is sometimes the only way to make room for something real. Only last week I ran into Elena at the grocery store. She looked thinner, her hair clipped short, her expression worn by a difficult year. We made eye contact over the apples. For a second, I thought she might approach. Instead, she offered a small nod, a mixture of acknowledgement and something like regret, before wheeling her cart down another aisle. I didn't feel victorious. There was no rush of triumph, no simmering anger, just a steady, quiet knowing. We had each ended up exactly where we were supposed to be. That night, as Naomi and I moved around the kitchen preparing dinner, this same kitchen where my old life had begun to fracture, I told her about the encounter. "Do you ever wish things had ended differently?" she asked. I stirred the sauce she'd taught me to make from scratch, letting the question sit for a moment. "I wish the ending had been softer," I replied. "But no, I don't regret that it ended." She gave a small nod, her eyes filled with the kind of understanding that doesn't demand every detail. She didn't need the full story to comprehend what I'd endured, just as I didn't need to know every chapter of her past to admire her resilience. What mattered most was that we were both still here, intact, weathered, and somehow, finally, together. That night, as she slept beside me, I lay awake thinking about the unpredictable path that had led me here. How betrayal had become an unlikely doorway to freedom. How something ending had made space for something new to bloom. How those same 5 words that once marked sorrow had been rewritten into a promise of love. Life doesn't always tie itself into a neat bow. It twists and turns, looping in ways that confuse and surprise, messy, imperfect, but often meaningful. Maybe revenge offered a kind of closure. But it was Naomi who gave me something far more rare, the chance to love again without fear. And this time, I wasn't going to let it slip through my fingers. This story has come to an end. Sometimes betrayal doesn't break a person, it reveals their strength. We often endure for the sake of family, love, or habit. But there comes a moment when silence becomes clarity. Justice isn't always loud or vengeful. Sometimes it's just a quiet, enough. This isn't a story about the collapse of a marriage, but about the importance of not losing yourself, even when everything around you falls apart. Love isn't only about giving. It's also knowing when to walk away, when you're no longer valued. And if one door slams shut, another one is opening nearby. The key is not to be afraid to step into a new life. What's your opinion? Share it in the comments, my friend. And if you like this story, check out other exciting videos on my channel. I'll say goodbye until the next video. See you. He was the man who could fix anything, except maybe the woman he loved. Imagine giving someone your heart, only to realize you're just their private joke when no one's looking. Declan built a life from scratch, turning wrenches and busted pipes into a successful business. But when his fiancée Sable starts using his career as comedy material at her posh corporate party, the cracks in their relationship are exposed in front of everyone. What do you do when love feels like home, but respect is missing? This is a story about pride, betrayal, and the quiet power of walking away when someone can't see your worth. Hello, my friend. I'm so glad you stopped by my channel. If it's your first time here, don't forget to subscribe and like this video, as every like truly inspires me. Please tell me which city and country you watch this video from. Now, let's get started. My name is Declan, and I'm 35. I run my own plumbing business, a trade I picked up from my uncle, who mentored me as though I were his own son. When he left me his small shop, I seized the opportunity to build on his legacy, expanding it from a modest 2-person operation into a thriving business with a team of 8. 3 years ago, I met Sable at a backyard barbecue. She worked in corporate marketing, spoke in polished industry jargon that sometimes went over my head, but carried herself with a kind of effortless confidence that drew me in. Despite our different backgrounds, we connected over a shared passion for horror movies, spontaneous ice cream runs, and weekend kayaking trips. At first, everything between us felt easy, but as time passed, subtle differences began to emerge. Her world revolved around polished professionals, and at her work gatherings, I often felt like an outsider. She never openly belittled me. Yet, whenever I mentioned my profession, she had a habit of steering the conversation elsewhere. It was never outright dismissive, but the implication was clear. She preferred to keep that part of my life separate from hers. I told myself it didn't matter, that love was what truly counted. After 2 years together, I proposed, and she accepted without hesitation. For a while, I believed we were solid. Then came the night of her company's holiday party, the night that changed everything. Determined to make a good impression, I dug out my only suit, reserved for weddings and funerals. Sable, radiant in a shimmering blue dress, was practically buzzing with excitement as we arrived at the venue, which had been transformed into a dazzling holiday spectacle. "Declan, stay close, okay?" she murmured. "I don't want you getting lost." I chuckled. "Don't worry, I'll be your shadow." Inside, Servers weaved through the crowd, trays of champagne flutes balanced expertly in their hands. While Sable eagerly accepted a glass of wine, I opted for sparkling water. She introduced me to her colleagues, Luna, who was overseeing the DJ, and Aaron, a sharply dressed man with a firm handshake. "So, how do you two know each other?" Aaron asked. With a smile, Sable flashed her ring. "Declan's my fiancé." The warmth in her voice made me feel, at least for that moment, like I truly belonged. For a while, everything seemed to be going smoothly. Then Victor, one of her co-workers, approached with an amused smirk. "Sable, you promised to introduce us to your legendary fiancé," he teased. "We hear he's got a magic touch when it comes to fixing things." I laughed. "I do my best." A woman nearby leaned in with curiosity. "So, what do you do for a living?" Before I could respond, Sable, now on her second, maybe third drink, giggled and interjected, "Oh, he's my personal plumber." A few chuckles rippled through the group. Then, with a playful smirk, she added, "So if anyone's toilet acts up tonight, don't worry. I've got the hookup." I forced a smile. I'd heard jokes about my job before, but something about the way she said it, like I was a novelty rather than a partner, left me unsettled. Later, as we sat for dinner, more introductions followed. The conversation at our table shifted toward my work, just as Sable's boss took the stage to deliver a speech. "So, Declan, how does a plumber manage to date a corporate rock star like Sable?" someone asked. I smiled. "Running my own business gives me the flexibility to set my own hours." Before I could elaborate, Sable cut in, her voice louder than necessary. "Yeah, but that also means he spends his days knee-deep in some pretty nasty stuff." She smirked. "At least he cleans up before coming home." Laughter spread across the table. My face burned, but I said nothing, telling myself she was just a little tipsy, just trying to be funny. And yet, the gnawing feeling remained. She wasn't presenting me as her equal, she was making me the punchline. As the evening wore on, Sable's boss, Naomi, stood to give a toast, recognizing the hard work of the team and highlighting a few standout employees, including Sable. Beaming, Sable leaned in and whispered, "I might be getting a promotion next quarter. Can you believe it?" I mustered a smile. "That's incredible. I'm proud of you." She squeezed my hand before turning back to the speech. Soon, Naomi invited team members to the stage for brief remarks. When Sable's name was called, I nudged her encouragingly, and she walked up with confidence, champagne glass in hand. "Thank you, Naomi," she began, her voice carrying through the room. "This means so much. Our team worked incredibly hard on this campaign." Applause followed. She took a breath, then continued. "I also want to give a special shout-out to my fiancé, Declan." She gestured toward me, prompting me to stand. Feeling awkward but wanting to be polite, I rose with a small smile. Sable grinned. "That's my plumber fiancé," she announced with a laugh. "If your sink or toilet ever gives you trouble, he's the one to call. And don't worry, he's pretty affordable." Scattered laughter filled the room, but this time the sound carried a different weight. There was an edge to it, a sharpness in her tone that stung. She sipped her champagne, clearly enjoying the moment. Someone from the front row called out, "Hey Declan, do we get company discounts?" More laughter. Sable turned to me with an amused grin. "Maybe," she teased. "But no freebies. We've got bills to pay, right, honey?" I forced another smile, but my chest felt tight. This was supposed to be her night, her celebration, yet somehow I had become the evening's entertainment. When she returned to her seat, giggling, her face flushed with excitement, I leaned in and asked quietly, "What was that about?" She waved a dismissive hand. "Oh, come on, Declan. Don't be so serious. It was just a joke." I swallowed hard, but the knot in my stomach refused to ease. It didn't feel like a joke. With a casual flick of her wrist, she dismissed me, her attention already shifting to a nearby colleague. I stared down at my untouched drink, a slow, dull ache blooming in my chest. The music swelled, the party rolled on, oblivious. Sable reached for another glass of champagne, unfazed. I pushed back from the table, rising to my feet. The need for space clawed at me, anything to put distance between myself and the suffocating realization that something between us had shifted. Stepping outside, I inhaled deeply, letting the crisp night air fill my lungs, cutting through the fog in my head. For a moment, I just stood there, breathing, my thoughts looping in an endless, frantic cycle. How did we get here? Why had Sable thought it was acceptable to humiliate me like that, reducing my career to a punchline in front of her colleagues? The sharp sound of heels clicking against the pavement pulled me from my thoughts. She was following me. A second later, her voice sliced through the stillness. "Hey." Impatience tinged her tone more than concern. I turned to face her. She still clutched her champagne glass, her expression unreadable. "Are you seriously upset about this?" she asked, her brow knitting in mild irritation. "Yeah," I admitted, working to keep my voice steady. "Sable, you made a joke out of my career, in front of an entire room of people. They weren't laughing with me. They were laughing at me." She let out a sharp breath, rolling her eyes. "Oh, come on, Declan. You're overreacting. It was just a bit of fun." I exhaled slowly, fighting to keep my frustration in check. That's exactly the problem. It wasn't fun for me. You turned me into some kind of spectacle, something to amuse your colleagues. Her cheeks were flushed, whether from embarrassment or the champagne, I couldn't tell. "You're blowing this out of proportion. People tease each other at parties. It's normal." I shook my head. "Not like that. Not by tearing down what someone does for a living. You made it seem like my job is something to be ashamed of." She looked at me as if I were speaking a foreign language. "Oh, don't be so dramatic. I respect what you do, but let's be honest. It's not exactly prestigious. I was just making light of how different our worlds are." I crossed my arms. "Respect? You only find my job charming when it's convenient, but the moment we're around your colleagues, it's a joke. And this isn't the first time. This has been happening for a while." She glanced back toward the entrance, suddenly cautious, as if worried someone might overhear. "Declan, can we not do this here? This is my company's party. Let's go back inside, have another drink, and talk about it tomorrow." A sharp wave of anger surged through me. "No, Sable. I'm done pushing this aside." Her expression darkened. "What's that supposed to mean?" I drew in a steadying breath, searching her face for any flicker of remorse. "It means," I said quietly, "I can't marry someone who doesn't respect me." She let out a disbelieving laugh, brittle and sharp. "You can't be serious. You're willing to throw away our engagement over a harmless joke?" I looked down at my hand, my fingers tightening around the simple band we had chosen together. My hands trembled slightly as I slid it off. For a moment, I just held it, remembering the day I proposed. Sable's eyes widened, alarm creeping into her features. "Declan, don't you dare," she warned, her voice rising. I extended the ring toward her. "If you can't understand why this matters, then there's nothing left to say. I won't spend my life defending my career to the one person who's supposed to support me." Her mouth parted in shock, and she took a step back. "Oh my God. You're actually serious? All this over a couple of jokes?" My jaw tightened. They weren't jokes. They were insults. You embarrassed me in front of everyone, and you won't even acknowledge it. Her expression hardened, frustration boiling over. "So what? You expect me to beg for forgiveness over something so minor?" "Grow up, Declan. People joke about their partner's jobs all the time. I never complain about the way you come home smelling like grease, or how you're always exhausted and covered in grime." A fresh wave of pain crashed through me. "Do you even hear yourself? Instead of apologizing, you're doubling down." She folded her arms, her lips pressing into a thin line. "Fine. I'm not sorry. and I'm not standing out here in the cold while you play the wounded victim. I looked at her, really looked at her, and the truth settled in my chest like a stone. She wasn't the woman I thought I loved, or maybe she never had been. All that remained was this dismissive, indifferent person who saw me as something less. "Then this is it," I said quietly. She let out a hollow, incredulous laugh. "I can't believe you're throwing everything away over this. You couldn't handle a little teasing, so now you're walking away?" I placed the ring in her palm. "I'm walking away because I deserve someone who's proud of me." Without another word, I turned and stepped back inside. I only had one thought: grab my coat and leave this night behind. As I re-entered the party, a hush seemed to settle over the room, the weight of my decision pressing against me. But for the first time that night, I felt lighter. Maybe people had overheard fragments of our argument, or perhaps the tension between us was so thick it was impossible to ignore. I reached for my coat, keeping my expression unreadable. Just as I was about to step out, Sable stormed in behind me, gripping the engagement ring so tightly her knuckles had gone white. Her face was flushed with frustration, her voice a sharp whisper. "Not here," she hissed. "You're causing a scene." I glanced around briefly. Aaron was murmuring something to the person beside him, and Naomi, her boss, observed us with thinly veiled concern. But at that point, I was beyond caring about appearances. "I wasn't the one who turned this into a public spectacle," I said evenly. "I tried to have this conversation privately, but you shut me down." She reached out, fingertips brushing against my sleeve, but I stepped back. "Declan, please. Let's talk about this when we're both calm." I met her gaze, disappointment sitting heavy in my chest. "That moment has passed, Sable." Without another word, I turned and walked away. The drive home was silent, aside from the persistent buzzing of my phone. Message after message lit up the screen. "We need to talk. You're overreacting. I'm sorry." I ignored them all. If she couldn't respect me in public, then what did that say about our relationship? By morning, she was still in the house, moving around quietly, but the air was thick with words left unsaid. I could feel her watching me as I got ready for work, waiting for me to engage. But I had nothing left to offer. Later, she started shifting the narrative, telling our mutual friends that I had lost my temper over a harmless joke. Some took her side, others reached out to hear mine. I kept my response simple. This wasn't about one joke. It was about a repeated pattern of disrespect. Some understood, others dismissed it. One message stood out in particular. "Dude, if you're that sensitive about plumbing jokes, maybe pick a career that's harder to mock." That one stung, but it also reaffirmed why I had walked away. That night, I told Sable to pack her things. The house was mine. I had bought it long before she came into my life. She tried to downplay everything, insisting I was making too big a deal out of it, but I was done with the debate. By morning, she was gone. She moved back in with her parents. A few days later, she shared her version of events online. When a man can't handle a strong woman with a sense of humor, his true colors show. According to her, I was insecure, controlling, unwilling to accept her personality. I chose not to engage publicly, but I did talk to people who mattered, like my cousin Todd, who had known me forever. "She's twisting it," he said. "You've never been insecure about your work. She just doesn't want to admit she was wrong." Then, as if the universe was making a statement, karma intervened. Not long after she moved home, her parents' bathroom pipes burst, flooding the floors and seeping into the walls. A mutual friend later mentioned the repair bill was in the thousands. For the first time, Sable probably understood. My work wasn't a joke. It was essential. She never reached out again, and I never got an apology. Instead, I focused on what truly mattered: growing my business, expanding my team, mentoring apprentices who actually valued the trade. Months passed. Sable changed departments at work, seemingly trying to move past the fallout. Rumors floated around that she was dating someone from her office. I never cared enough to ask for details. My life had moved on. One evening, after a long day of installing pipes in a historic building, I sat in my truck, watching the golden light reflect off my company's freshly redesigned logo. A deep sense of gratitude settled over me. I won't lie. There were moments I missed certain things about Sable, her adventurous nature, the way she'd curl up next to me during scary movies. But I never missed the way she made me feel small. Eventually, I started dating again. This time, I found someone different, someone who saw the value in what I did, who admired my skills rather than ridiculing them. She loved that I built things with my hands, that I created something real, and she was proud of me. That changed everything. Now, whenever someone asks for relationship advice, I keep it simple. Pay attention to how your partner talks about you in public. Do they uplift you, or are you just another punchline? Because respect isn't optional, it's everything. This story has come to an end. It doesn't matter what you do for a living, plumber, doctor, barista. If the person next to you is ashamed of you or looks down on your work, that's not love, that's convenience for them. A real partner will be proud of you, your hard work, and will stand by you both privately and publicly. Never let anyone turn you into a joke to make themselves look better. Respect is not optional. It's the foundation of any relationship. And if someone can't give you that, have the courage to walk away, because one day you'll find someone who truly values and appreciates you for who you are. What's your opinion? Share it in the comments, my friend. And if you like this story, check out other exciting videos on my channel. I'll say goodbye until the next video. See you